I thought the worst moment was the car crash. Feeling the guardrail buckle while my 3-day-old daughter screamed in the back. I was wrong. The real impact hit me an hour later in the emergency room, when I watched my mother look at the social worker holding my baby and refuse to take her. That refusal didn't just break my heart. It exposed a lifetime of debts and lies that only my grandfather's voice could finally stop. The freezing rain in Briar Glen was not just weather, it was a physical weight. Pressing down on the roof of my sedan, with a relentless, rhythmic drumming that matched the pounding in my temples, I was 33 years old. I had been a mother for exactly 72 hours, and I was terrified of everything. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the sleet that turned the Massachusetts Turnpike into a smear of gray and charcoal. In the rearview mirror, the baby carrier was a dark silhouette. Nora was back there, wrapped in 3 layers of blankets, a knit cap, and the crushing anxiety of a first-time mother who feels like she is piloting a spacecraft rather than a Honda. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My body still felt foreign to me, stitched and sore, bleeding and swollen. The postnatal checkup at Pine Ridge Women's Clinic was mandatory. They said, essential. I had tried to tell Ethan that I could drive myself, that he did not need to leave his shift at Maple Line Hardware. We needed the hours. The hospital bills were already stacking up on the kitchen counter like a grim monument to our new life. And my maternity leave from the library was unpaid. I am fine. I had told him, I am capable. I checked the mirror again. Nora was silent. Too silent. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. Was she breathing? Was the heater too high? Was it too low? I reached a hand back blindly, my fingers brushing the hard plastic of the carrier handle. Focus. Lila. The exit for Northbridge Parkway loomed ahead, a curving concrete ramp slick with oil and ice. I tapped the brakes to disengage the cruise control. Preparing for the deceleration, the pedal went to the floor. It did not catch. It did not grind. It simply sank into the carpet as if it were attached to nothing at all. For 1 second, my brain refused to process the data. I lifted my foot and pressed again. Harder. Nothing. The car was gliding at 55 miles per hour toward a sharp right curve, and the engine was humming along as if we were on a Sunday drive. Warning lights flared on the dashboard. Red, orange, a symphony of mechanical failure. Oh God. I gripped the wheel. The guardrail was rushing toward me, a streak of galvanized steel. If I hit the car in front of me, the impact would accordion the trunk where Nora sat. I could not do that. I could not let anyone touch the back of this car. I yanked the wheel to the right, aiming for the gap between a slowing delivery truck and the shoulder. The tires lost traction instantly on the black ice. The world tilted. The horizon spun. We did not spin out. We slid, heavy and inevitable, slamming sideways into the metal guardrail. The sound was not a crash. It was a crunch, deep and sickening, like a giant stepping on a tin can. The airbag detonated with the smell of gunpowder and dust, punching me in the face before I could even scream. My head snapped back, the seatbelt locked across my chest, digging into my tender, milk-heavy breasts with bruising force. Then, silence. For a heartbeat. There was only the hiss of the radiator and the ticking of cooling metal. Then came the sound that shattered me. Nora screamed. It was a thin, high-pitched wail of pure terror that cut through the ringing in my ears. I scrambled, clawing at the deflating airbag, ignoring the warm wetness sliding down my forehead. Nora. I tried to turn, but pain exploded in my abdomen, a hot, tearing sensation that made me gasp. My door was crushed in. I could not move my legs. Nora, I wheezed. I am here. Mommy is here. I fumbled for my phone in the cup holder. The screen was cracked, spiderwebbed fractures obscuring the time. My fingers, shaking so hard they looked like they belonged to someone else, smeared blood across the glass as I dialed Ethan. It rang once, twice. Lila. His voice was cheerful. He was probably at the paint counter, mixing a gallon of eggshell white. You okay? The brakes, I choked out. The brakes failed. I crashed. Northbridge ramp. The silence on the other line was total. Then I heard the sound of something heavy dropping to the floor. Metal clattering against tile. "I am coming," he said. His voice was unrecognizable. "I am coming right now." I dropped the phone as blue lights washed over the interior of the car, pulsing against the shattered windshield. A face appeared at my window. A police officer in a yellow slicker, his mouth moving, but I could not hear him over the screaming in the back seat. "Please," I mouthed, pointing backward. "The baby! Get the baby!" The world began to gray at the edges. I saw the officer wrench the back door open. I saw him lift the carrier out. I saw the pink blanket. "Keep her warm," I whispered, though no one could hear me. "She gets cold so fast." Then the pain in my stomach rose up like a tide and pulled me under. Pine Ridge Medical Center was a chaotic hive of fluorescent light and urgent voices. I was on a gurney, staring up at ceiling tiles that rushed by in a blur. People were shouting numbers: blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation. "Where is she?" I grabbed the arm of a nurse running alongside me. "My daughter, Nora Collins. She is in the pediatric evaluation unit." "Honey," the nurse said, prying my fingers off her scrub top. "She is fine. The EMT said she was secure. Just hungry and mad. You need to worry about you right now." "No," I said. "I need to see her. We need to get you to imaging," a doctor said from somewhere behind my head. "Possible splenic rupture. Free fluid in the abdomen. Let us move." They parked me in a trauma bay, cutting my sweater off. The cold air of the hospital hit my skin, making me shiver violently. The pain was duller now, masked by adrenaline and whatever they had pushed into my IV, but the fear was crystal clear. "Ethan, I need Ethan. He is on his way," the nurse said. Then the curtain whipped back. It was not Ethan. It was my mother. Marlene Bishop stood in the doorway of the trauma bay like she had walked out of a magazine spread. She was wearing a camel-colored wool coat, belted tightly at the waist, and black leather gloves. Her hair was a perfect blonde helmet. Immobile despite the storm outside, she did not look worried. She looked inconvenienced. She looked at the blood on my forehead, the ripped clothes, the IV lines, and her lip curled slightly. "Look at this mess," she said. "Mom," I whispered. My throat felt like it was filled with glass. "I got a call from the police," she said, stepping into the room but staying careful not to touch anything. "They found my number in your phone under emergency contacts. I thought you took that off years ago." "I forgot." I said, "Clearly," she sighed, adjusting her gloves. "Well, you are alive. That is the important thing. But Lila, really, driving in this weather with a newborn, it is reckless. The brakes failed," I said, tears leaking out of the corners of my eyes. "It was not my fault. It never is." "Is it?" she said softly. A nurse bustled in, holding a clipboard. "You are the grandmother," Marlene stiffened. "I am Marlene Bishop." "Yes. Okay. Ms. Bishop," the nurse said, looking harried. "We are taking Lila up for a CT scan and likely emergency surgery to stop some internal bleeding. Her husband is not here yet. The baby, Nora, has been cleared by pediatrics, but we do not have staff to hold her in the nursery right now because of a pileup on the interstate. We are swamped." The nurse gestured to a bassinet that another aide had just wheeled into the hallway outside the bay. Nora was inside, red-faced and screaming, her tiny fists punching the air. "Can you take the baby for an hour or two?" The nurse asked, "Just until the husband gets here and gets processed. She needs to be held. She is scared." I looked at my mother. I saw her eyes flick to the bassinet, then back to the nurse. I saw the wall go up. It was a look I knew better than my own face. It was the look that meant the store was closed, the bank was empty, and the well was dry. "No," Marlene said. The nurse blinked. "Excuse me, I cannot do that," Marlene said, her voice smooth and hard as a river stone. "I am not dressed for it, and I simply cannot handle a newborn right now. It is too much stimulation. I have high blood pressure." "Mom," I choked out. "Please, Ethan is coming. Just hold her." Marlene looked at me, and for a second, I saw something dark flash behind her eyes. It looked like fear, but it twisted quickly into resentment. "Lila, you know how I am," she said. "I raised you. That was enough. I told you when you got pregnant that I was not going to be a built-in babysitter. I will not be trapped again." "It is not babysitting," the nurse said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming stern. "It is an emergency situation. Your daughter is going into surgery. Then find a professional." Marlene snapped. "That is what hospitals are for. I am here to support my daughter, not to run a daycare." She turned her back on the bassinet. She did not even look at Nora. A new woman stepped into the bay. She wore a lanyard that said, Janelle Price, LICSW. She was tall, with braids pulled back in a low bun, and eyes that missed nothing. She moved with a quiet authority that made the frenetic energy of the ER slow down around her. "Ms. Bishop," Janelle said, "I am the social worker on duty. I understand you are hesitant, but here is the reality. Lila is going under anesthesia. Her husband is not on the premises yet. If there is no family member willing to take temporary responsibility for the infant, I have to initiate a protective hold." Marlene smoothed the front of her coat. "That sounds like a procedural issue, not a personal one. It means Nora goes into the custody of the state for the night," Janelle said calmly, "into a foster placement, until the parents can be verified and cleared. It is traumatic for the child and the family. All you have to do is sign this form." She held out a tablet accepting supervision for perhaps 60 minutes. Marlene looked at the tablet like it was a loaded gun. "I am not signing anything," she said. "Mom," I cried out, trying to sit up. The pain slammed me back down. "You cannot let them take her. I am not taking liability," Lila Marlene shouted, her composure cracking for the first time. The mask slipped, revealing a frantic, terrified animal underneath. "I cannot have my name on any more legal documents. I cannot be responsible for a child. What if something happens to her? What if she has brain damage from the crash and I am the one holding her? No, I refuse." She stepped back, hitting the metal tray of instruments. "I am leaving," Marlene said. "I cannot be here for this. It is too much pressure." She turned and walked out. She walked past the bassinet where her granddaughter was crying. She did not break stride. The automatic doors hissed open, and she vanished into the hallway. I lay there, the sound of her heels clicking away echoing in my head louder than the heart monitor. She left. I whispered. Janelle Price sighed. She looked at me, and her expression was not pitying. It was fiercely sad. "I am sorry, Lila," she said. The orderlies unlocked the wheels of my gurney. "We have to go." "Lila," the doctor said, "your pressure is dropping." "Wait," I begged, grabbing Janelle's hand. "My husband, Ethan, I will find him," Janelle said. "But right now, I have to follow protocol." They wheeled me out. As we passed the nurse's station, I heard Janelle speaking into her radio. Code status on the infant Collins. No family placement available. Initiate emergency clearance. The words hit me harder than the airbag. No family placement. I closed my eyes, hot tears tracking into my ears. I was not crying for the surgery. I was not crying for the car. I was crying because my mother had looked at my helpless, terrifyingly small daughter and seen nothing but a burden she could walk away from. And she had walked. The recovery room was a fog of beeping machines and the heavy metallic taste of anesthesia. I fought my way back to consciousness, feeling like I was swimming through molasses. "Ethan." I forced my eyes open. The clock on the wall said 7:15. How much time had passed? 2 hours. 3, my abdomen felt tight, bound in bandages. I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry as dust. Lila Ethan was there. He was sitting in a plastic chair next to the bed, still wearing his orange vest from the hardware store. His face was gray, his eyes rimmed with red. He looked like he had aged 10 years in an afternoon. "Nora," I rasped. He stood up and leaned over the bed, kissing my forehead. His hands were shaking. "She is okay. She is right here." He stepped back, and I saw the clear plastic bassinet on the other side of the bed. Nora was swaddled tightly, sleeping. I let out a breath that felt like it emptied my entire soul. "You made it," I said. "Barely," Ethan said. His voice was grim. He sat down heavily. It was a nightmare. "Lila, what happened? I got here 10 minutes after they took you up," he said. "I ran to the desk. I told them who I was, but what he rubbed his face with his hands. There was grease under his fingernails. A clerical error. The system was down because of the storm. They could not verify my ID against the birth certificate because the electronic records were frozen, and because Marlene—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "Because Marlene left. I finished for him." Ethan nodded. "Because there was no family member to vouch for me, and the system was down. Security would not let me back. They would not let me see Nora. They were calling child services. Lila. A woman named Janelle was on the phone with an emergency foster placement. I was standing there screaming at them through the glass, and they were filling out paperwork to take our baby away. My heart hammered against my ribs. So how is she here? How did you get in?" Ethan looked at the door. "He did not do it." I frowned. "Who the door opened?" Janelle Price walked in. She looked tired, but she offered me a small, professional smile. "Welcome back, Mrs. Collins," she said. "Janelle?" I said, "Thank you. For whatever you did." Janelle shook her head. She walked over to the foot of the bed. Holding a file folder, "I did not do it," she said. "I was following protocol. My supervisor was pushing me to finalize the transfer. We had a foster family in Northbridge ready to drive over. I felt sick." "So what happened?" I asked. Janelle tapped the folder. "I was stuck. Your mother had refused guardianship. Your husband was legally unverified due to the IT outage. I had one option left. I went back to your intake form, the old one from 5 years ago that you never updated. I remembered the form. I had filled it out the day I found out I was pregnant with a miscarriage that happened before I even met Ethan. I had just moved back to town. There was a secondary emergency contact listed." Janelle said, "Walter Bishop, my grandfather. I had not spoken to Walter in 4 years. Not since the fight at Christmas when Marlene had screamed at him to get out of her house and he had walked out into the snow without a coat. Marlene had told me he was toxic. She said he was controlling, that he used his money to manipulate us. I had believed her. I had taken her side. Because she was my mother, and she was all I had." "You called Walter?" I asked. Janelle nodded. "I called him from the alcove by the vending machines. I explained the situation. I told him his granddaughter was in surgery, and his great-granddaughter was about to be placed in state care because Marlene Bishop had walked out." She paused, looking at Ethan, then back to me. "He answered on the first ring." Janelle said, "He listened to me for about 10 seconds. He did not ask how the crash happened. He did not ask if you were guilty. He did not ask about the car." "What did he say?" I whispered. Janelle opened the folder. She pulled out a piece of paper that looked like a fax, the ink still fresh and slightly smeared. He said, "Put your supervisor on, and tell them to pull the Bishop Family Trust directive on file." I stared at her. "The what?" The tone of the hallway changed instantly. Janelle said, "Apparently, Doctor, Soren Hale, our chief of administration, knows your grandfather. Personally," Ethan leaned forward, "Lila." 5 minutes after she made that call, the head of the hospital came down to the waiting room. He personally overrode the security lock. He walked me back to Nora himself. He apologized to me. I looked at the fax paper in Janelle's hand. It was a legal document, a directive. Janelle placed it on the tray table. "Walter Bishop arrived 20 minutes ago," she said. "He is in the waiting room. He brought a lawyer. And he brought this." I looked down at the paper. It was a notarized letter, dated 3 years ago. It stated that in the event of any medical incapacitation of Lila Collins, the Bishop Family Trust assumed immediate legal advocacy for her dependents, superseding any other familial claims if the primary guardian was absent or incapacitated. "He had this on file?" I asked. For 3 years, Janelle nodded. He knew. Lila knew what he knew, that if something happened, You might need a safety net that was not your mother. The realization washed over me, cold and clarifying. Walter had not just fixed a clerical error. He had anticipated it. He had known, somehow, that Marlene would fail me. He had built a trapdoor under my life to catch me when I fell, and he had sat in silence for years, waiting for the moment he hoped would never come. Is he... Can I see him? I asked. Janelle nodded. I will send him in. She turned to leave, but stopped at the door. One more thing. Lila, she said. Her voice was lower now, serious. Yes. When your mother refused to sign the caregiver form, I had to document it. It is in the official social work record now. Maternal grandmother refused emergency placement, cites unwillingness to accept liability. I closed my eyes. I know, that record matters, Janelle said. If there is ever a custody dispute, or a question of family fitness, that note does not go away. Walter knows that. I think that is why he brought the lawyer. She slipped out the door. I looked at Ethan. He was holding my hand so tight it hurt, but I did not pull away. She left us. Ethan, I whispered. She just left us. I know, he said. His voice broke. I saw her in the parking lot. Lila. When I was running in, she was sitting in her car. She was crying, I asked. A tiny part of me still hoping. Ethan shook his head. No. She was checking her makeup in the visor mirror, and she was talking on the phone. Who was she talking to? I do not know, he said. But she looked relieved. A chill that had nothing to do with the hospital air settled deep in my bones. The door opened again. Walter Bishop stood there. He looked older than I remembered. His hair was completely white now, thinned at the temples. He wore a dark wool coat, damp with rain, and he held a fedora in his hands. He was a small man, physically, but he filled the doorway with a kind of dense gravity. He did not rush to the bed. He did not cry. He stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind him. He looked at Ethan and gave him a short, respectful nod. Then he looked at the bassinet where Nora slept. He stared at her for a long time, his expression unreadable. Finally, he looked at me. His eyes were the same gray as the storm outside, but they were not cold. They were incredibly, painfully tired. Hello, Lila, he said. Grandpa? I said. I felt the tears coming again. He walked to the side of the bed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. He did not wipe my tears. He simply placed it in my hand, closing my fingers over the soft cotton. I handled the administration, he said. His voice was raspy, like dry leaves. The child is safe. The husband is cleared. The hospital knows who pays the bills now. Thank you, I said. Marlene. We will not speak her name tonight, Walter said. He said it calmly, but there was a finality in it that silenced the room. Not tonight. Tonight is for healing. He pulled a chair closer and sat down, resting his hands on the head of his cane. I am not leaving. Lila, he said, I am going to sit right here, and if anyone from this hospital tries to move that baby 1 inch without your permission, they will have to go through me, and I have become a very difficult old man. I looked at him, this man I had been told was a villain, and then I looked at my husband and my daughter. For the first time since the brakes failed, I stopped shaking. I squeezed the handkerchief. Okay, Grandpa, I said. Okay, he repeated. He settled back in the chair, his eyes fixed on the door, standing guard. Outside, the freezing rain continued to batter the glass. But in the room, it was quiet. The silence was not empty anymore. It was fortified, and I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that my life had just split into 2 parts, everything before the crash, and everything that was about to happen now. The anesthesia did not leave me all at once. It receded like a tide, slow and heavy, dragging pieces of my consciousness back to the surface one by one. I floated in a gray space where time did not exist, anchored only by the rhythmic beep of a monitor and the low, steady murmur of voices that sounded safe. I learned later what had happened while I was under the knife. While the surgeons were repairing the tear in my spleen and suctioning the blood from my abdominal cavity, I learned that the hospital hallway, which had been a place of panic and bureaucracy only an hour before, had been transformed by the arrival of a single man. Walter Bishop had not come to Pine Ridge Medical Center to hold my hand. He had come to hold the line. He had arrived within 40 minutes of Janelle Price's phone call, walking through the sliding glass doors with a singular, terrifying focus. He was not shouting. He was not running. He simply walked to the nurse's station, placed a leather folder on the counter, and laid a single business card on top of it. Hartwell and Pierce, LLP. It was a law firm that did not handle traffic tickets or divorces. They handled mergers, estates, and the kind of quiet, devastating litigation that ruined companies. Janelle told me later that the shift in the air was instantaneous. Walter did not ask for permission. He asked for Dr. Soren Hale. I knew the name vaguely. Dr. Hale was on the board of directors for the hospital. He was a man who attended galas and cut ribbons, not someone who came down to the emergency department on a rainy Tuesday night. But Walter had picked up his phone, dialed a private number, and spoken 3 sentences. Soren, I am in your NICU waiting area. My granddaughter is in surgery, and your staff is threatening to put my great-granddaughter in foster care because of a clerical error. Fix it. 5 minutes later. Doctor. Hale had walked onto the floor in a tuxedo jacket over jeans, looking breathless. He had personally bypassed the security lockout on the computer system. He had signed the verification for Ethan himself. The emergency placement call was canceled. The foster family was told to stand down. By the time I fully woke up, the war was already over. I blinked, the harsh fluorescent light stinging my eyes. The pain in my stomach was a dull, throbbing heat, but it felt manageable. I turned my head to the left, expecting to see an empty chair or a nurse checking vitals. Instead, I saw my life. Ethan was sitting in the rocking chair in the corner of the recovery room, his shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest. Against his skin, tiny and fragile, was Nora. She was wearing only a diaper and a knit hat, her small back rising and falling in perfect sync with his breathing. The sight of them skin to skin, safe, together broke something open inside me. It was a relief so violent it felt like a sob caught in my throat. Ethan, I whispered. He looked up immediately. His eyes were red-rimmed and shadowed with exhaustion. But when he saw me, his face softened into a look of pure, unguarded love. Hey, he said softly. He did not get up, careful not to disturb the baby. You are back. Is she okay? She is perfect, Ethan said. He looked down at the top of her head, brushing his chin against the knit cap. She was hungry. They let me feed her a bottle about an hour ago. She took 2 ounces. I closed my eyes, letting the tears leak out. 2 ounces. It sounded like a miracle. She was almost gone. Ethan, I said, the memory of the crash and the chaos in the ER flooding back. Mom, she wouldn't take her. I know, Ethan said. His voice hardened. Just a fraction. I know, Lila. But she is here now, and she is not going anywhere. I tried to shift my weight, wincing as the incision pulled. I looked past Ethan to the other side of the room. Walter was still there, sitting in the straight-backed visitor chair, his cane resting against his knee. He was reading a newspaper, or pretending to. You stayed, I said. Walter folded the paper and set it on the side table. He looked at me with that same steady, unreadable expression he had worn since I was a child. I told you I would, he said. Did you really call Dr. Hale? I asked. Walter shrugged, a small motion of his shoulders. We serve on a foundation board together. It was a courtesy call. It was not a courtesy call. I thought it was a command. Thank you, I said. Walter nodded once, acknowledging the thanks but dismissing the sentimentality. You should know, he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. Your mother is in the cafeteria. She came back about 20 minutes ago. My stomach twisted, and it had nothing to do with the surgery. She came back. She seems to be under the impression that she is still needed. Walter said dryly. She brought coffee. The door handle turned. Speak of the devil, Ethan muttered, his hand cupping Nora's head protectively. Marlene Bishop walked in. She had freshened her makeup. Her hair was brushed back into place, and she was carrying a cardboard tray with 3 Starbucks cups. She looked composed, almost cheerful, as if she were arriving for a casual lunch rather than visiting a daughter she had abandoned in a trauma bay. Lila, she exclaimed, her voice pitched high and bright. You are awake. Oh, thank God. I have been sick with worry. She set the coffee tray down on the rolling table and walked toward the bed, her arms open. I shrank back into the pillows. I could not help it. The last time I had seen her, she was walking away from my screaming baby while I begged her to stop. Marlene stopped, sensing the recoil. She hesitated, her smile faltering for a second before she plastered it back on. I brought lattes, she said, gesturing to the tray. And I brought a scone for Ethan, although I assume he has already eaten from the vending machine. She looked at Ethan, then at Nora. Well, she said, I see we finally got the paperwork sorted out. What a nightmare that was. Honestly, the incompetence of this hospital is staggering. I am going to write a letter to the board. She was rewriting history in real time. She was smoothing over the cracks, painting herself as a victim of bureaucracy rather than a participant in it. Marlene turned to look at the other side of the room, and for the first time, she noticed Walter. She froze. The color drained out of her face so fast it looked like a magic trick. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her hands, which had been reaching for her purse, clenched into fists at her sides. Walter, she said. Her voice was ice. Marlene. Walter replied. He did not stand up. He did not smile. He simply looked at her. What are you doing here? She demanded. The brightness of her tone replaced by a sharp, brittle edge. I was listed as an emergency contact. Walter said, since the primary grandmother was unavailable. Marlene flushed, a blotchy red creeping up her neck. I was not unavailable. I was overwhelmed. I stepped out to compose myself. I told that nurse I needed a moment. You told the nurse you do not do newborns. I said, my voice was raspy, but it was loud enough to cut through the tension. You said you would not be trapped again. Marlene spun toward me, her eyes wide. Lila, you were in shock. You were half sedated. You do not remember what was said. I remember every word. Mom, I said, I remember you walking away. Marlene let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She waved her hand as if swatting away a fly. This is ridiculous. I was in shock too. My daughter had just crashed her car. I have high blood pressure. Lila, you know that. I needed air. And that social worker, that woman, was aggressive. She was trying to force me to sign legal documents without my reading glasses. It was a trap. It was a safety plan. Ethan said from the corner. His voice was low, but it vibrated with suppressed anger. They needed someone to hold Nora so she did not go to strangers. And I told them to wait for you, Marlene snapped. I knew you were coming. I was simply setting a boundary. I cannot take care of a baby. Ethan, I am not equipped for it. I was protecting Nora by not taking her when I was in such a state. She looked around the room, seeking an ally, but she found only 3 walls of judgment. And then I come back, she continued, her voice rising, to find him here. She pointed a manicured finger at Walter. You think you are the hero? She spat at him. You think you can just swoop in with your checkbook and play the savior? You have not seen her in 4 years. Walter, I am here now, Walter said. You are here to control things, Marlene said. That is all you ever do. You smell a crisis, and you come running so you can pull the strings. I looked at my mother. She was shaking. It was not just anger. It was fear. She looked like a cornered animal, and suddenly, the polished exterior, the coat, the hair, the lattes looked like a costume. Mom, please, I said. I am tired. Marlene looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. I did not buy them. I just wanted to help, she whispered. I came back to help. You came back when the hard part was over. I said. Marlene stiffened. She grabbed her purse, Fine, she said. If everyone is going to gang up on me, I will go. I have a migraine anyway, but do not think I do not see what is happening here. She glared at Walter one last time. Stay away from my daughter, she hissed. Walter did not blink. Goodbye, Marlene. She turned and marched out, the heels of her boots striking the linoleum like gunshots. The door swung shut, and the silence that followed was heavy and thick. Ethan let out a long breath. Jesus. I closed my eyes, the adrenaline crash leaving me feeling hollowed out. She is never going to admit it, is she? I asked. She is never going to say she was wrong. Walter shifted in his chair. He tapped his cane on the floor. People like Marlene do not have a reverse gear. Lila, he said, they only move forward, usually over other people. 2 hours later, Ethan had taken Nora to the nursery for a diaper change and a checkup with the pediatrician. The room was dim, the rain still lashing against the window. Walter moved his chair closer to the bed. Lila, he said, we need to talk. Not about the accident, I said. I do not want to talk about the brakes. Not about the accident, he agreed. About the trust. I looked at him. Janelle mentioned a directive. Something about a clause. Walter nodded. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a pair of reading glasses. Years ago, when you were still in college, I set up a trust fund. He said, it was not huge, but it was enough to ensure that if anything happened to me, you would have a safety net. I did not know that. I said, I know, he said. I kept it quiet. I knew if Marlene knew about it, she would apply pressure. He paused, choosing his words carefully. When you got pregnant, I updated the terms. He said, I added a specific clause. It is called the Emergency Guardianship Directive. It states that in the event of your medical incapacity, while you have a dependent child, the trust immediately triggers a review of the guardian designation. Why, I asked. Why would you do that? Because I know your mother, Walter said, and I know that in a crisis, people panic. But Marlene does not just panic. She calculates. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. Lila, I did not come here today just because Janelle called me. I came because that phone call confirmed something I have suspected for 6 months. Marlene is unstable. Unstable how I asked. Financially, Walter said. And legally, I frowned. What do you mean, Mom has the house? She has her job at the foundation. She always has new clothes. Walter looked at me with a profound sadness. The house has been refinanced 3 times. Lila, and her position at the foundation, let us just say, it is titular at best. She is drowning. I stared at him. That is not possible. She just bought a new car last year. Leased, Walter corrected, and she is 3 months behind on the payments. My head was spinning. Why are you telling me this now? Because, Walter said, when people are drowning, they grab onto anything that floats. And right now, you and that baby are the only things floating in her life. He tapped the side of the bed. My clause was designed to prevent panic decisions. He said, it was designed to stop Marlene from using your child as a bargaining chip or a sympathy tool to get access to resources. When she refused to take Nora today, she proved my point. She proved that when the pressure is on, she cannot be trusted with a life. She can only be trusted to protect herself. I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. So you think she refused Nora because she didn't want the responsibility? I think she refused Nora because she is terrified of anything she cannot control. Walter said, and a baby is pure chaos. But now that the dust has settled, she will be back. She will try to regain access. Not because she wants to change diapers, but because being the grandmother is a role she can play to garner sympathy and maybe, eventually, money. He reached out and patted my hand. His skin was dry and cool. I am telling you this so you are prepared. Leela, you have to protect that little girl, not just from cars and ice, but from people who love you in the wrong way. The next morning brought a gray, washed-out light and a visit from Janelle Price. She came in with a clipboard and a soft expression, but her business was official. Ethan was asleep in the chair, his head lolled back, snoring softly. Nora was in the bassinet next to my bed. "Good morning, Lila," Janelle whispered. "How are the pain levels manageable?" I lied. It felt like I had been kicked by a horse. "I just need to go over some discharge planning," she said, "and I wanted to explain a note in your file, just so you are not blindsided later." She turned the clipboard around. "Yesterday, when your mother refused placement, I had to log it." Janelle said, "The code is caregiver unavailable/refusal of emergency custody." "Okay," I said. "It is just a note, right?" "It is a legal record," Janelle said gently. "It means that in the eyes of the hospital and potentially the state, Marlene Bishop has been documented as an unreliable safety resource. If you ever need to list a guardian for Nora, or if there is ever a question of who takes the baby in an emergency, this note will flag her. It essentially disqualifies her from being a primary placement option without a significant review." I nodded slowly. "So, if something happens to me and Ethan, Nora goes to Walter or to another designated guardian." Janelle said, "But not to Marlene, not automatically." The door to the room was open a crack. I saw a shadow move in the hallway. Suddenly, the door was pushed open. Marlene was standing there. She had returned, as Walter predicted. She was holding a teddy bear this time. She looked from Janelle to me, and her eyes narrowed. "I heard that," she said. "Ms. Bishop," Janelle said, her voice remaining calm. "We were just discussing discharge paperwork. You were discussing me," Marlene snapped. She walked into the room, ignoring the sleeping Ethan. "You are flagging me. You are putting me on a blacklist. I am documenting the events of yesterday," Janelle said. "You are building a case," Marlene said, her voice rising. "That is what this is. You and my father. You are conspiring to cut me out. You are trying to make me look like a monster because I had a panic attack in a hallway, Mom. Keep your voice down," I hissed. "You will wake the baby." Marlene spun on me. "You are letting them do this. Lila, you are letting them write lies about me in a government file. It is not a lie." "Mom," I said, my voice cracking. "You left. You walked away. I came back," Marlene shouted. Ethan jerked awake. He sat up, blinking, confused for a second before his eyes focused on Marlene. "Hey," he barked. His voice was deep and sudden. "Calm down." Marlene breathed heavily, her chest heaving. She looked at the three of us. "Fine," she said, clutching the teddy bear so hard the stuffing looked like it might pop out. "Write your notes. Mark your files. But I am her grandmother. Blood matters more than paperwork. You will see." She threw the teddy bear onto the foot of my bed. "For the baby," she said. Then she turned and walked out again. Janelle watched her go, then made a small note on her clipboard. "I am sorry," Janelle said. "Don't be," I said, staring at the bear. I picked it up. It still had the price tag on it. $40. She didn't have money for her car payment, but she had $40 for a prop. Just make sure that note is in bold. Janelle. By the afternoon, the rain had stopped, leaving the world outside the window looking scrubbed and raw. Ethan sat on the edge of my bed. He had been quiet for an hour, staring at his hands. "What is it?" I asked. He looked up. He looked guilty. "There is something I didn't tell you yesterday," he said. "With the surgery and your mom and Walter, I didn't want to pile it on." What I asked, my heart rate picked up on the monitor. "Beep, beep, beep. The car," Ethan said. "Is it totaled?" I asked. "Yeah, it is totaled," he said. "But that is not it." He took a breath. "When I was talking to the responding officer, the guy who pulled the car seat out, he said something weird." "What did he say?" "He said the skid marks were strange." Ethan said, "He said there was no ABS pulsing, like the brakes didn't just fade, but cut out completely, and when the tow truck driver hooked it up, he noticed fluid all over the inside of the wheel well. Fluid, brake fluid." Ethan said, "The line was severed." "Lila?" I stared at him. "Severed like it snapped." The tow guy said it looked like unusual wear. Ethan said, "He said usually those lines rust out or crack over time, but this looked clean." The word hung in the air between us. Clean. I felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. It was an old car. Ethan, I said, it had 100,000 miles on it. I know, Ethan said. And that is probably all it is. Just a catastrophic failure on an old part. But what? But I keep thinking about how you said the pedal just went to the floor. He said, no warning, no noise, just nothing. I looked at Nora sleeping in the bassinet. I thought about the moment the pedal sank, the total, weightless horror of it. It was an accident. I said firmly, it has to be an accident. Ethan nodded. But he didn't look convinced. Yeah, of course. The next day, I was alone in the room for the first time. Ethan had gone down to the cafeteria to get food, and the nurses were changing shifts. My phone, which had been sitting on the bedside table, lit up. It was a number I did not recognize, a local area code. I watched it ring. Once, twice, I picked it up. Hello, Mrs. Collins. The voice was female, crisp and professional. Yes. Hi. This is Kara Wren. I am a claims adjuster with Greystone Mutual Insurance. We handle your auto policy. Oh, I said, hi. Do you need a statement? Not yet, she said. I am actually calling regarding the preliminary inspection of your Honda Civic. We have it at the impound yard in Northbridge. Okay, Mrs. Collins. Our investigator took a look at the vehicle this morning to assess the damage for the payout value. Kara said. She paused. There are some irregularities with the brake line failure. Irregularities, I repeated. The word felt heavy in my mouth. Yes, she said. Specifically, the nature of the rupture in the hydraulic line. It does not appear to be consistent with standard corrosion or impact damage. I gripped the phone tight. What are you saying? I am saying that we are flagging this as a suspicious claim pending further investigation. She said, we are going to be bringing in a forensic mechanic. I sat in silence. The room felt suddenly very small. Mrs. Collins. Kara asked, I am here. I whispered, I have to ask you a standard question. She said. Her voice was neutral, devoid of accusation, but full of implication. Is there anyone who would have a motive to tamper with your vehicle? Anyone with access who might wish you harm? My mind flashed instantly to my mother. I saw her face in the trauma bay. I won't be trapped again. I heard Walter's voice. She is unstable. I thought about the financial desperation. But no, that was insane. That was a movie plot. My mother was selfish. She was narcissistic. She was cold. But she was not a killer. She was my mother. She had bought a teddy bear. No, I said. My voice shook. No one. It was just me and the baby. Okay, Kara said. We will proceed with the investigation. I will be in touch. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. I looked at Nora. She was awake, her dark eyes staring up at the ceiling, her tiny hands grasping at the air. Anyone with motive. I wanted to protect my mother. It was a reflex, as deep and old as my own heartbeat. I wanted to shield her from suspicion, to pretend that the darkness in our family was just emotional, not physical. But then I looked at my daughter. I looked at the small, fragile pulse in her neck, and I realized that my job had changed. My job was no longer to be a good daughter. My job was to keep this child alive. If someone had cut that line, if someone had treated my safety and my daughter's life like a bargaining chip, then it did not matter if we shared blood. It did not matter if she was my mother. If she had done this, I would not just cut her off. I would destroy her. The doubt was a cold, creeping vine in my chest, and for the first time in my life, I did not try to pull it out. I let it grow. The drive home to Cedar Hollow felt longer than any drive I had ever taken. I sat in the passenger seat of Ethan's truck, a pillow pressed against my healing abdomen to buffer the bumps, while Nora slept in her brand-new car seat in the back. The town was quiet, a patchwork of colonial houses and bare maple trees under a sky that could not decide if it wanted to rain or snow. Our house was small, a 2-story Cape Cod with peeling white paint and a porch that leaned slightly to the left, but when Ethan pulled into the driveway, It looked like a fortress. "We are home," Ethan said, turning off the engine. He did not wait for me to move. He got out, unbuckled Nora, carried her inside in her carrier, and then came back for me. He offered me his arm, his grip firm and unyielding. "I can walk," I said, though my knees felt like water. "I know," he said, "but you do not have to." That first week back was a blur of fragmented sleep and physical limitations. My world shrank to the four walls of the living room and the nursery. Recovery from spleen surgery was not just about healing skin, it was about relearning how to move without triggering a sharp, hot agony in my side. I could not lift Nora. That was the hardest part. I could hold her if someone placed her in my arms, but I could not pick her up from the crib. Ethan became my hands. He took the night feedings, bringing Nora to me in bed, changing her diapers, pacing the hallway at 3 a.m. when she fussed. He managed the visitors, too. When neighbors came by with casseroles and curiosity, Ethan met them at the door, thanked them, and kept them on the porch. He protected my recovery with a gentle firmness that I had never seen in him before. He was usually the easygoing one, the one who avoided conflict. Now, he was a gatekeeper, but there was one visitor he could not easily block, because she did not knock. She infiltrated. Marlene began her campaign of concern on my second day home. It started with a delivery van pulling up to the curb. The driver unloaded a box the size of a refrigerator. It was a high-end ergonomic rocking chair, upholstered in Italian velvet. The card attached read, "For my girls, only the best. Love, Nana." Ethan looked at it, his jaw tight. "We do not have room for this," he said. "It is a peace offering," I said, trying to find a reason to accept it. "She is trying." "Ethan, she is buying," Ethan corrected. "There is a difference." Then came the social media notifications. I was lying on the couch, scrolling through my phone while Nora nursed. When I saw it, Marlene had posted a photo of herself looking wistfully out a window with a caption that read, "Nothing hurts more than having your family stolen by misunderstandings and bureaucracy. Praying for healing and for hearts to soften. Grandma is waiting." It had 60 likes and a dozen comments from her friends saying things like, "Stay strong, Marlene, and they will come around." She was spinning a narrative where she was the victim, the exiled matriarch waiting in the cold. She did not mention refusing to hold her granddaughter in the NICU. She did not mention walking out. I felt a flash of anger, hot and prickly, but I pushed it down. I was too tired to fight. I just wanted my mother to be normal. I wanted her to be the grandmother who came over and washed dishes, not the martyr performing for an audience on Facebook. Walter was different. He did not send velvet chairs. He sent a plumber to fix the leaking tap in the downstairs bathroom because he remembered me mentioning it weeks ago. He sent a box of high-protein meals from a catering company in the city, and on Thursday, he came himself. He sat in the kitchen, drinking black coffee while Ethan folded laundry in the living room. Walter looked at me, his eyes scanning my face for signs of fatigue. "I hired a mechanic," he said. I paused, my hand hovering over my tea mug. "What Ridgeway Auto Works," Walter said. "They are the best in the state for forensic diagnostics. The car is at the impound lot, but I got authorization to have them look at it before the insurance company finalizes their report." "Walter," I said, feeling that creeping dread return. "The police said it was likely a mechanical failure. The car was old. Cars do not just decide to stop braking." "Lila," Walter said, "not like that. And not when you just had it serviced 3 months ago." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "I want your permission to share the Ridgeway findings with a private investigator I know." Walter said, "His name is David Hines. He is discreet." "A private investigator," I whispered. "Grandpa, this is getting out of hand. If we start investigating, we might find the truth," Walter said. "Or we might find nothing, and we just look paranoid." I said, "Or worse, we find out it was just bad luck, and I spent my energy chasing ghosts instead of bonding with my baby." Walter did not push. He simply laid the paper on the table. "Think about it," he said. "But Lila, peace built on a lie is not peace. It is just a ceasefire waiting to break. The crack in the ceasefire happened on a Tuesday. Ethan had gone to the grocery store, and I was home alone with Nora for the first time. I was feeling stronger, able to shuffle to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. The air was crisp, smelling of wet leaves and wood smoke. I pulled a stack of envelopes from the box, bills, a flyer for pizza, a pre-approved credit card offer, and a letter from Silver Oak Credit Union. It was addressed to Marlene Bishop. The postman must have misread the address or grouped it with my mail by mistake. Marlene lived 3 streets over. I stared at the envelope. It was stamped urgent and final notice in red ink. I knew I should not open it. It was a federal offense. It was a violation of privacy. But I remembered Walter's words in the hospital. Marlene is unstable. She is drowning. I took the letter inside. I sat at the kitchen table, my heart hammering against my ribs. I used a butter knife to slide the flap open. It was a delinquency notice for a home equity line of credit. The amount overdue was $12,000. The total loan amount was nearly $80,000. But it was not secured against Marlene's condo. The property address listed as collateral was 42 Briar Lane. My stomach dropped. 42 Briar Lane was a small rental property my father had left to me when he died. Marlene managed it for me because I was in college when he passed, and I had never taken over the paperwork. She sent me a check for the rent every month, $600. She had taken out a loan against my property. She had forged my signature. I felt like the floor was tilting. This was not just debt. This was theft. I heard the front door open. Ethan walked in, shaking rain off his jacket. "Hey," he said, "I got the diapers and the—" "Lila, what is wrong?" He dropped the bags and rushed to the table. I held up the letter, my hand shaking. She stole from me. I whispered, "She mortgaged the rental house." Ethan took the letter. He read it, his eyes narrowing. He sat down opposite me, exhaling a long, sharp breath. "Okay," he said. "Okay, this explains a lot." "What do you mean?" Ethan looked at me, and I saw a hesitation in his eyes, a secret he had been keeping. "Lila, I need to tell you something," he said. "You said you told me everything about the crash." I said, "This isn't about the crash, not directly." He said, "It is about the day of the crash." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "When I was running into the hospital, before I got stuck at the security desk, I saw your mother in the parking structure. You said she was on the phone." I said, "She was." Ethan said, "But before that, she was talking to someone, a man, who I recognized him from when we were dating." Ethan said, "From that barbecue your mom threw 5 years ago. The guy with the Corvette, Vince Calder." I felt the blood drain from my face. Vince Calder. Vince was Marlene's on and off boyfriend from a decade ago. He was a man who always wore suits that were slightly too shiny, who spoke fast, and who always had a new investment opportunity that could not fail. He had disappeared from her life after a bad breakup involving a lawsuit, but I knew he had resurfaced recently. He was there, I asked. At the hospital, he was leaning into her car window. Ethan said, "And it didn't look friendly." Lila. Marlene looked terrified, and Vince looked aggressive. I looked at the letter from the bank. Then I looked at Ethan. "Debt," I said. "She is in debt. Vince is back." And the brakes failed. The pieces were clicking together, forming a picture I did not want to see. "I need to talk to her," I said. "Lila." "No," Ethan said. "Let Walter handle it." "No," I said, standing up. The pain in my side flared, but I ignored it. "She is my mother. I need to hear her say it. I need to know why." I invited her over an hour later. I told her I needed help with the baby monitor. It was a lie, but I knew it was the one thing that would bring her running the chance to feel necessary. Marlene arrived with a bag of pastries and a nervous energy that made the air in the kitchen vibrate. She was wearing a silk blouse and her signature pearls, but her eyes were darting around the room as if she expected a trap. I fixed the monitor. "Nana," she announced, setting the bag on the counter. "It was just a pairing issue. I am very good with technology. You know. Thank you." "Mom," I said, I was sitting at the table, the silver oak letter face down under a placemat. She sat down across from me, smiling too brightly. "So," she said, "how are we doing? Is Ethan treating you well? You look pale, Lila. You should really get some sun." I watched her. I looked for the monster. I looked for the villain who had cut the brakes of her daughter's car. I did not see a monster. I saw a woman who was aging, whose neck was starting to crape, whose hands were trembling slightly as she reached for a napkin. "Mom," I said, "I got a letter today." Marlene froze. Her hand stopped midair. "Oh," she said. "What kind of letter?" "From Silver Oak Credit Union," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Marlene's face went through a series of micro-expressions: confusion, panic, calculation, and finally, a crumbling defeat. She slowly lowered her hand to the table. "It came here," she whispered. "It was supposed to go to the P.O. box. Why is there a loan on the rental property?" "Mom," I asked. My voice was steady, but my heart was breaking. I didn't sign for that. Marlene looked down at her hands. She began to twist the diamond ring on her finger. "I was going to pay it back," she said. Her voice was small, like a child's. "I had a plan." "Lila, it was a bridge loan, just to get through the quarter." "What did you need $80,000 for?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Was it Vince?" I asked. Her head snapped up. "How do you know about Vince? Ethan saw him." I said, "At the hospital." Marlene's face crumpled. She put her face in her hands and began to weep. It was not the polite, pretty crying she did at funerals. It was ugly, gasping sobs that shook her shoulders. "He came back 6 months ago." She choked out. "He told me he had changed. He said he had a development deal in Northbridge. He needed capital. He said he would double it in 90 days. And you gave him the money." "I didn't have the money," she wailed. "The foundation cut my stipend. My credit cards were maxed out, so I used the property. I thought I was helping us. I thought if I made a profit, I could set up a trust for Nora. I wanted to have something to give." "Lila." She looked up at me, her mascara running down her cheeks. "But the deal fell through." She said, "It always falls through. And now he says I owe him more. He says I owe him interest. He has been following me. Lila. He calls me at night." I stared at her. The pathetic reality of it washed over me. She wasn't an evil mastermind. She was a mark. She was a lonely, desperate woman who had been conned by a man she wanted to love her. "So the hospital," I said, "when you refused Nora." Marlene wiped her nose with the back of her hand. I was panicking. She said, "Vince was in the parking lot. He told me if I didn't get him $10,000 by midnight, he was going to tell Walter everything. He was going to tell everyone I committed fraud. I couldn't hold the baby." "Lila." I was shaking. I was trying to figure out how to survive. She reached across the table, grabbing my hand. Her palms were clammy, and then the crash happened. She whispered, and for a second, I thought it was a sign. I pulled my hand back. A sign, I thought, if you were hurt, if you needed serious help, Walter would have to open the main trust. She said, "The big one, the one he locked me out of." I thought if I could get power of attorney while you were recovering, I could access the funds. I could pay Vince off. I could fix everything before you even knew it was broken. I stared at her in horror. "You wanted to use my accident to pay your debts," I asked. "I wanted to save us," she cried. "I did it for us." "Lila. If Vince exposes me, I go to jail. Who takes care of you then? You call that taking care of me?" I asked, hoping I stay hurt so you can rob my grandfather. "It isn't robbery," she screamed. "It is my money too." He cut me out. She stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. "You don't understand what it is like," she said, panting, "to be his daughter. To have him look at you like you are a disappointment every single day. I just wanted to win. Lila, just once." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I felt a profound, heavy grief. I was grieving the mother I kept wishing for. I wanted the mother who would protect me from the storm. Instead, I had a mother who would throw me into the storm if it meant she could stay dry. Get out, I said. Lila. Get out. Mom. Go home. She looked at me, stunned. She grabbed her purse and the bag of pastries. I will fix this, she said. You will see. I will fix it. She ran out the back door. I sat at the table for a long time. Ethan came in from the living room. He had been listening. He put his hand on my shoulder. I called Walter. He said, he is on his way. Walter arrived an hour later. He did not look surprised when I told him about the loan and Vince. He looked tired. He sat in the same chair Marlene had vacated. I hate this part. Walter said, I hate that you have to know this. Know what? Why I removed her as a trustee, he said. He folded his hands over his cane. 10 years ago, Marlene was the treasurer for the Briar Glen Family Outreach. He said, it was a nonprofit. They helped families in crisis. I remember. I said, she won an award. She stole $50,000 from the emergency fund. Walter said, my mouth fell open. She was funneling it to Vince Calder. Walter continued. He was running a pyramid scheme involving medical supplies. When the board found out, I stepped in. I paid back every cent anonymously so they wouldn't prosecute her. I made her resign, and I removed her from my trust. He looked at me. She has been trying to get back in ever since. Lila. She believes she is owed that money. She believes I ruined her life. And Vince, I asked. Vince is a predator, Walter said, and he smells blood. 2 days later, the email from Ridgeway Auto Works arrived. Walter printed it out and brought it to the house. We stood in the kitchen, me, Ethan, and Walter looking at the diagram of a brake line. There were photos, close-ups of the rubber hose. The report was technical, full of words like shearing force and clean incision, but the summary was plain English. The failure of the brake line was not consistent with wear and tear. The line shows distinct tool marks consistent with a serrated blade. The cut was partial, allowing the vehicle to operate for a short duration before hydraulic pressure caused a catastrophic rupture. It was deliberate. Someone had cut the line halfway through, knowing that the next time I slammed on the brakes like on a highway off-ramp, it would snap. I felt sick. I ran to the bathroom and dry heaved into the sink. Ethan was right behind me, rubbing my back. They tried to kill us. I choked out, Ethan, they tried to kill Nora. We do not know who they is yet, Walter said from the doorway. His voice was cold steel. But we can guess. Vince, Ethan said. Or Marlene, I whispered. No, Walter said. Marlene is a thief and a narcissist. But she is not a murderer. She lacks the follow-through. But Vince has a record. Walter looked at me. Lila, this is no longer a family dispute. This is a criminal investigation. I am giving this report to the police and to the insurance investigator. Do it, I said. That night, I changed. I had spent my life trying to be the peacemaker, the good girl who smoothed things over. But looking at the camera feed on my phone, the new security cameras Ethan had spent the afternoon installing on the porch and the garage, I felt my spine stiffen. I typed an email to Marlene. Mom, effective immediately. You are not to come to the house. You are not to contact me or Ethan. If you want to see Nora, it will be supervised, and it will be approved by us in advance. If you show up uninvited, we will call the police. We know about the loan. We know about Vince. And we know about the brakes. Do not test me. Lila. I hit send. The response took less than 10 minutes. My phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text message. How dare you? I am your mother. You cannot keep my grandchild from me. I have rights. I will sue you for grandparents' rights. I will drag you through court until you have nothing left. I showed the text to Walter, who was sitting in the living room, watching the news. He read it. He took out his own phone. He dialed Marlene's number. He put it on speaker. She answered instantly. I am going to destroy you. Lila Marlene, Walter said. Dad. Her voice faltered. Listen to me very carefully. Walter said, if you file a single motion for visitation, if you even whisper the words, grandparents' rights to a lawyer, I will walk into the courtroom and I will testify. Testify about what she snapped. About the hospital. Walter said, I will testify that you refused to take custody of your newborn granddaughter when her mother was in surgery. I will testify that you abandoned her to the state because you didn't want to be trapped, and I will bring the social worker, Janelle Price, to read her official notes into the record. There was silence on the other end. Do you want that read in open court? Marlene Walter asked softly. Do you want the whole town to know that you walked away? Marlene made a sound that was half sob, half growl. You wouldn't, she said. It would humiliate the family. I am done protecting the family name, Walter said. I am protecting Lila. He hung up. I looked at him. Thank you, I said. He looked at the black screen of his phone. Do not thank me yet, he said. Cornered animals bite, and Vince Calder is still out there. He stood up and walked to the window, peering out into the darkness of Cedar Hollow. This is not over. Lila, it is just escalating. I looked down at Nora, sleeping in her swing. I touched her cheek, let it escalate. I thought, I am ready. I walked over to the wall and checked the monitor for the new security system. The green light blinked steadily. Recording. I was not the daughter anymore. I was the mother. And I would burn the whole world down to keep her warm. The courier envelope from Hartwell and Pierce arrived on a Wednesday morning, delivered by a man in a crisp uniform who asked for my signature with the solemnity of someone serving a subpoena. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and heavy. It felt less like mail and more like a brick being added to the wall Walter was building around us. I sat at the kitchen table, pushing aside a stack of burp cloths to make room. The house was quiet. Ethan had gone back to work at the hardware store for a half-day shift, needing the hours despite his exhaustion. Nora was asleep in her bassinet, making those small, squeaking sounds that constantly made me check her breathing. I slit the envelope open. Inside was a cover letter on stationery so thick it practically snapped, followed by a 20-page document titled Bishop Family Trust Beneficiary Support and Asset Protection Protocol. I read it twice. It was an offer. Or perhaps it was a lifeline disguised as a contract. Walter was initiating an immediate review of the trust to release funds for my medical bills, which were currently sitting in a terrifying stack by the microwave, and for professional childcare support. It covered the deductible for the car insurance. It offered a monthly stipend for household stability during my recovery. But there were conditions. The funds would be paid directly to vendors, not to me. A third-party accountant would oversee the ledger, and most pointedly, there was a clause in bold print, no funds from this disbursement may be transferred, gifted, or loaned to any restricted party listed in Schedule A. Schedule A contained only one name, Marlene Bishop. I put the paper down and looked out the window at the gray sky over Cedar Hollow. My first instinct was to tear it up. I had worked since I was 16. I had paid my own way through library school. Ethan and I lived paycheck to paycheck, but we owned our struggle. We were proud of our small, peeling house and our budgeted grocery lists. Accepting this felt like admitting defeat. It felt like stepping back into the shadow of the Bishop money. The very thing my mother had spent her life chasing and resenting. But then I tried to stand up to refill my water glass, and the incision in my abdomen seized with a hot, sharp pain that made me gasp. I looked at the counter where the overdue notice for the ambulance ride lay open. $2,000 just for the transport. Pride is a luxury. I thought, I cannot afford luxury right now. I picked up my phone and called Walter. I got the letter. I said when he answered, "Good," he said. His voice was gravelly, steady. "I will sign it," I said, "but I have conditions." I could hear him pause. He was not used to people negotiating with him. "Name them." "I am not your employee." "Walter." I said, "I want to see the ledgers. I want to approve every vendor. And this ends when I go back to work. I am not going to be a kept woman. I am accepting a bridge, not a lifestyle." "Fair enough," Walter said instantly. "It is already set up that way. Lila, the goal is independence, not control. And one more thing." I said, "Yes, if Marlene finds out about this, she's going to say you are buying me off. She's going to say you are poisoning me against her with money. She will say that regardless." Walter said, "The truth does not matter to her." Lila, only the narrative matters. I signed the papers that afternoon. When I dropped the envelope in the mailbox, I felt a strange mix of shame and relief. I had sold a piece of my pride, but I had bought safety. The investigation moved from the theoretical to the procedural with a phone call from Kara Wren at Greystone Mutual. She requested a formal recorded statement. I sat in the nursery, the door closed, rocking the chair slightly as I held the phone to my ear. Mrs. Collins, do you understand that this call is being recorded for the purpose of claim adjudication and potential criminal inquiry? Kara asked. I do, I said. She walked me through the timeline, the weather, the speed. The moment the pedal sank, I answered clearly, keeping my voice flat. I stripped the emotion out of it. I did not tell her about the terror of hearing Nora scream. I just gave her the physics of the crash. Then came the hard questions. Mrs. Collins, in our previous conversation, you stated you had no knowledge of anyone with a motive to harm you. Has that changed? I closed my eyes. I pictured Marlene's face in the hospital parking lot. I pictured the letter from the credit union. Yes, I said. Can you elaborate? I recently discovered that my mother, Marlene Bishop, has taken out a fraudulent loan against a property I own. I said. I paused, forcing the next words out. She is in significant debt, and on the day of the accident, my husband observed her in a heated conversation with a man named Vince Calder near the hospital. And who is Vince Calder? Kara asked. He is an ex-boyfriend of hers. I said, he has a history of financial schemes. Did Mr. Calder have access to your vehicle? I hesitated. Not that I know of. I have not seen him in years. Kara made a small sound, the scratching of a pen on paper. And your mother? Did she have access to the vehicle? My stomach turned over. Yes, she borrowed it 2 weeks before the crash. Thank you. Mrs. Collins, Kara said, we will be sharing this transcript with the detective assigned to your case. When I hung up, I felt like I had just betrayed my own blood. I had formally accused my mother of being connected to a crime. But then I looked at the crib. I looked at the way Nora's hands were curled into fists. She refused to hold her. The guilt evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Marlene did not take the silence lying down. When she realized her texts were being ignored and her access to the house was blocked, she escalated. The call came from Dr. Soren Hale's office at the hospital. Mrs. Collins, the secretary said, sounding uncomfortable. We have received a formal complaint regarding your stay. A complaint, I asked. From who? From a Ms. Marlene Bishop. She said, she has filed a grievance with the Patient Advocacy Board. She claims that your grandfather, Mr. Walter Bishop, intimidated hospital staff and violated HIPAA regulations by accessing your records. She also... The secretary stopped. She also what I asked. She claims that your husband, Ethan Collins, appeared unstable and threatening in the ER, and that the hospital was negligent in releasing the infant to his care without a proper social work assessment. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. She is saying Ethan is unfit. She is saying the hospital failed to protect the child from a volatile environment. The secretary said, Look, Mrs. Collins, Dr. Hale has already reviewed the footage. The complaint is baseless. We are dismissing it. But because it was filed formally, it generates a paper trail. We have to interview the staff involved. She is trying to muddy the water. I said, she is trying to create a record that says we are the problem. We are handling it, the secretary assured me. But Dr. Hale wanted you to know. I hung up and walked into the living room. Ethan was on the floor, assembling the new swing. He looked up, smiling, holding a screwdriver. Who was that? He asked. I looked at him, this gentle, steady man who had slept in a chair for 3 nights to make sure I didn't have to lift the baby. It was the hospital. I said, Marlene filed a complaint. She said you were unstable. Ethan's smile vanished. He slowly lowered the screwdriver. She went after me, he asked. She went after all of us. I said, she is trying to rewrite what happened. Ethan stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the street. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He just went very, very quiet. She is not just your mother anymore. Lila, he said softly. She is the enemy. The stress of the complaint sat in my chest like a stone. My milk supply dropped. I spent hours pumping, staring at the plastic flanges, willing my body to provide for Nora, but the anxiety was choking me. 2 days later, Janelle Price knocked on the door. She was not wearing her hospital badge. She was in a raincoat and jeans, holding a travel mug. "Hi, Lila," she said. "I am technically off the clock, but I wanted to do a voluntary check-in." I let her in. I was wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, my hair in a messy bun. The house smelled of formula and laundry detergent. "Did she send you?" I asked, gesturing to the world at large. Janelle sat at the kitchen table. "No, but the complaint crossed my desk. I saw what she wrote about Ethan, and I saw what she wrote about Walter. And it is a classic deflection tactic." Janelle said, "I see it in custody cases all the time. The person who dropped the ball tries to convince everyone else that the ball was slippery." She looked around the kitchen. She saw the chart on the fridge where Ethan tracked Nora's feedings. She saw the bottles drying on the rack. She saw the way I was holding Nora, protective but relaxed. "Lila, I want you to hear this," Janelle said. "The hospital's goal is the stability of that baby. We know the difference between a panicked father and a dangerous one. Ethan was panicked because his wife was in surgery and his baby was alone. That is a normal, healthy reaction." She took a sip of her coffee. "Your mother's reaction, refusing to hold the child, leaving the premises, and now filing retaliatory paperwork, that is what we call a pattern of instability." "So we are okay?" I asked. "She can't take her," Janelle smiled. "She has zero leverage." "Lila, her complaint actually hurt her. It proved she is focused on her own ego, not the baby's safety. You are doing a good job. You and Ethan, this is a healthy home." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, massive and suffocating. "Thank you, Janelle." She stood up to leave. "Just keep the doors locked," she said quietly. "People who lose control tend to try and kick the doors down." Walter came by on Friday evening. He brought a container of beef stew from the diner in town and a manila folder. He didn't come in to chat. He walked around the perimeter of the house first, checking the new motion sensor lights Ethan had installed. Then he came into the kitchen, set the stew on the counter, and opened the folder. "My investigator found something," Walter said. "About the car," Ethan asked. "Joining us." "About Vince." Walter said. He pulled out a photocopy of an employment record. "Vince Calder has been working temp jobs for the last 6 months." Walter said, "Mostly under the table, but for 3 weeks in October leading up to the crash, he was on the payroll at Northbridge Fleet Services." I frowned. "What is that?" "It is a contractor," Walter said. "They handle overflow maintenance for the city, but they also have a contract with several towing companies to manage their impound lots and overnight garages." Walter tapped the paper. "They have a garage on State Street. It is where your car was towed after the crash, but it is also where he would have had access to tools, hydraulic lifts, cutting equipment." "He worked there?" I asked. "He was a night watchman and a fluid tech." Walter said, "He knows his way around the undercarriage of a car." "Lila." A memory flashed in my mind, sharp, vivid. "Wait," I said, what Ethan asked. I closed my eyes. Traveling back 2 weeks before the accident, I was 9 months pregnant. Huge, swollen. Marlene had come over. She said her car was in the shop. She needed to run errands. She asked to borrow the Civic. "It will just be for an hour." "Lila, I have to pick up a prescription." I had hesitated. I didn't like her driving my car. But I was tired, and arguing felt like too much work. I gave her the keys. She was gone for 4 hours. When she came back, she was flushed, breathless. She said traffic was terrible, but that wasn't what I remembered most. The smell. I whispered, "Lila," Walter asked. 2 weeks ago." I said, looking at him, "Marlene borrowed my car. She said she had errands. When she brought it back, the seat was moved all the way back. Way further than she would need it. She is shorter than me, and it smelled." I said, "I thought it was just my pregnancy nose. I was sensitive to everything, but it smelled like chemicals. Sharp, like solvent, brake cleaner." Ethan said grimly. I nodded. I opened the windows to air it out. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought she had spilled something. Walter's face was hard as stone. If she gave Vince the car, Walter said, even for an hour, he could have weakened the line. He could have made a partial cut. Something that would hold for city driving but snap under sudden, high pressure, like a panic stop on a highway. I said, Walter nodded. It fits. The timeline fits. I felt sick. My mother hadn't just ignored the danger. She had delivered the weapon. That night, the house felt different. It felt sieged. Ethan and I lay in bed, the baby monitor glowing softly on the nightstand. I could hear the wind rattling the gutters. I opened the door. Ethan said into the dark. I turned to look at him. What I encouraged you to let her back in, he said. His voice was thick with guilt. When you were 6 months pregnant, you wanted to keep her at arm's length. And I told you to invite her to the baby shower. I told you to let her borrow the car. I thought if we just included her, she would step up. I thought being a grandmother would fix her. Ethan, don't. I said, I did. Lila. I wanted a normal family so bad that I ignored who she was. I let the fox into the henhouse because I wanted to believe it was a dog. I reached out and found his hand under the quilt. You didn't cut the line. Ethan, I said, you didn't take out the loan. You were trying to be kind. Kindness almost got you killed. He whispered. I squeezed his hand. We know now, I said. We know who she is, and we are not going to be kind anymore. We are going to be safe. Ethan turned and pulled me into him. He buried his face in my neck. He held me like he was afraid I would disappear if he let go. And in that moment, I realized that the crash hadn't broken us. It had welded us together. Marlene had tried to break my support system to make herself necessary, but all she had done was show me who my real family was. The weekend passed in a tense, quiet haze. Walter came by every day. He didn't stay long. He didn't demand I make him tea. He came. He checked the locks. He fixed a loose rail on the porch that had been bothering me for months. And he left. It was such a contrast to Marlene, who arrived with fanfare, who demanded praise for bringing a coffee, who filled the room with her neediness. Walter just worked. He showed his love by making sure the ground under my feet was solid. On Sunday afternoon, I was folding laundry in the living room when the phone rang. It was the landline, a number only a few people had. I picked it up. Hello, Lila. It was Marlene. Her voice sounded wet, ragged. I told you not to call. I said. I reached for the button to hang up. I am coming over, she said. No, you are not. I said, Marlene, I have the police on speed dial. If you step on this property, I will have you arrested for trespassing. I have to tell you, she screamed. The sound distorted on the line. I have to explain. Explain what? That you gave Vince my car, that you let him sabotage the brakes. There was a silence, a long, terrified silence. I didn't know he was going to cut them. She whispered. I froze. What did you say? He told me he just needed to check the VIN number. She sobbed. He said he needed to check the parts for a recall. He said it was for safety. Lila, I thought he was helping. You are lying. I said, my voice was shaking. You are lying to save yourself. I am not, she cried. I am your mother. I love you. You don't love me, Mom. I said, you love being the victim. I hung up. 10 minutes later, I saw her car. She pulled up to the curb, but she didn't get out. She just sat there, idling. Ethan was in the yard instantly, standing between her car and the house. He didn't have a weapon, but his stance was a wall. He pointed down the street. Go. I watched from the window. I saw Marlene screaming behind the glass of her windshield. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw her face. It was twisted, red, ugly with desperation. Then, she slumped over the steering wheel. I didn't move. I didn't run out to check on her. A minute later, my phone buzzed. A text from her. He stole my life first. I stared at the screen. Walter, she typed. He stole my life when he cut me off. I was supposed to be the heir. I was supposed to be the one who mattered. I just wanted to show him. I wanted to show him that I could save you when he couldn't. I wanted you to need me. If you needed me, he would have to give me the money to help you. It was supposed to be my win. I read the words, and the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. It wasn't about the debt. Not really. It wasn't about Vince. It was about Walter. She had spent her entire life in a one-sided war with her father, trying to force him to respect her, to fund her, to validate her. And when he cut her off, she decided to manufacture a tragedy where she could play the hero. She wanted me broken so she could be the one to glue me back together using Walter's money. She had risked my life, and Nora's life, to win an argument with her father. I looked out the window. Ethan was still standing there, unmoving. Marlene put the car in gear and drove away, slowly, defeated. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. But it wasn't for her. It was for the little girl I used to be, the one who kept waiting for her mother to grow up. She never would. She confused being needed with being loved. She thought if she could make me helpless, I would have to love her. I looked down at the trust documents on the table. No funds. To any restricted party. Walter knew. He had always known. I picked up the pen and circled Marlene's name on Schedule A. I pressed down so hard the ink bled through to the wood of the table. Never again. The transition from being a victim of a car accident to a subject of a criminal inquiry did not happen with a bang. It happened in my living room on a Tuesday morning, over cups of lukewarm coffee and a pile of file folders that smelled like toner and stale air. Kara Wren from Greystone Mutual sat on my sofa. Next to her was Detective Miller from the Cedar Hollow Police Department. He was a heavy-set man with kind eyes and a posture that suggested he had seen enough bad things to be perpetually tired. "We are formally reclassifying the file," Kara said. She placed a document on the coffee table. "It is no longer an accident claim. It is a suspicious loss with potential criminal intent." I looked at the paper. The words were black and stark. Tampering. Detective Miller said. His voice was a low rumble. "We have the report from Ridgeway Auto. We have the brake line analysis. And now, thanks to your statement, we have a financial motive and a suspect with access. Vince," I said. "We are looking at Vincent Calder." "Yes," Miller said. "But we are also looking at the chain of custody of the vehicle." He looked at me, and I knew what he was asking without him having to say it. He was asking about my mother. "We are going to need to interview Marlene Bishop," Miller said, "and we are going to need to subpoena her phone records. If she was communicating with Calder in the days leading up to the crash, we will find it." I felt a wave of nausea. Subpoenas. Police interviews. This was my mother. I remembered her teaching me how to tie my shoes. I remembered her braiding my hair. And now I was sitting here, nodding while a detective discussed pulling her call logs to see if she had conspired to kill me. "Do what you have to do," I said. Marlene did not wait for the subpoena to arrive before she showed up. It was 2 days later. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening a storm that wouldn't break. I was in the kitchen, trying to get Nora to latch, when I heard the heavy thud of a car door closing in the driveway. I checked the monitor. It was her. She walked up the path, but she didn't look like the polished, aggressive woman who had threatened me on the phone. She looked small. She was wearing a coat that was buttoned wrong, and her hair was loose, flying in the wind. She knocked. It was a soft, tentative sound. I handed Nora to Ethan. "I have to do this." I said, "Lila, be careful," Ethan said. I walked to the front door. I unlocked the deadbolt but kept the chain on. I opened the door 3 inches. "Lila," Marlene said. She pressed her face to the crack. "Please, go away." "Mom," I said. "I cannot go away," she said. Her voice cracked. "They called me. Lila. The police called me. They want me to come in for questioning." "Good," I said. "Tell them the truth." "I didn't know," she cried. "I swear to you, Lila, I didn't know he would hurt you." "Then why did you give him the car?" I asked. She ignored the question. She started crying, wiping her eyes with dirty hands. "I want to start over," she sobbed. "I brought you a stroller. It is in the trunk. It is the one you wanted. The expensive one. Please, Lila, open the door. Let me see the baby. We can fix this. We are family. Family forgives. I looked at her. I looked at the desperation in her eyes. It wasn't love. It was panic. She wanted to come inside because if she was inside, she was safe. If she was holding the baby, she was the grandmother again. Not the suspect. I will open the door, I said quietly. Her face lit up. Hope, bright and pathetic, washed over her features. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Lila, I will open the door, I repeated. If you can say one sentence, anything, she said. Look at me and say I refuse to hold my newborn granddaughter in the hospital, and it was wrong. Marlene froze. The hope vanished, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. Lila, don't do this. Say it. I said, no excuses, no stories about your blood pressure. Just say it was wrong. Marlene shifted her weight. She looked at the porch railing. She looked at the sky. I was in shock. She said, you know I have anxiety. Lila. I was trying to protect her from my own panic. It wasn't a refusal. It was a safety choice. I closed my eyes. Even now, with the police circling, she could not do it. She could not occupy a reality where she was the villain. That is what I thought. I said, I started to close the door. Lila, she screamed. She threw her weight against the wood. The chain pulled taut, rattling violently. Open this door. He is going to kill me. Vince is going to kill me if I don't get the money. I slammed the door shut and threw the deadbolt. I stood there, breathing hard, listening to her pound on the wood. You are buying me, she screamed through the door. You are letting Walter buy you. He is turning you into a whore for his money, just like he tried to do to me. I slid down the door until I hit the floor. I sat there, hugging my knees, listening to my mother scream insults at the house she had once helped me paint. Walter arrived that evening with a folder of documents that effectively sealed Marlene's fate. He sat at the kitchen table, looking like a general reviewing battle plans. I have filed a protective financial order. Walter said. What does that mean? I asked. It means that the distribution of funds from the trust, the money paying for your medical bills, and the baby's needs is now legally locked. Even if Marlene were to somehow get power of attorney over you, she cannot touch it. It is insulated. I nodded, pouring him tea. She was here today. I said, she said you were buying me. Walter paused. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. She has said that for 20 years, he said, since the day I cut her off. To Marlene, love and money are the same currency. She thinks if I give you money, I am purchasing your loyalty. Are you? I asked. It was a question I had been too afraid to ask. Walter looked at me. His gray eyes were steady. I am buying your freedom. Lila, he said, I am buying you the ability to say no to her. I am buying you the ability to say no to me. If you want to, he pushed the folder toward me. If you want me to stop paying the bills, tell me. I will walk away. I will leave the money in an account you can access in 10 years, and I will never call you again. I looked at the folder. I looked at the man who had hired a mechanic, a lawyer, and an investigator before I had even woken up from surgery. No, I said, stay. The next morning, Ethan was rummaging through a box of old electronics in the basement. We were looking for a spare charging cable for the baby monitor. Lila, he shouted up the stairs. Come here. There was an urgency in his voice that made my stomach drop. I ran down the stairs, holding my side. Ethan was standing by the workbench, holding an old landline answering machine. It was a dusty, brick-like device we had kept from before we switched to digital. I plugged it in to test the outlet. Ethan said, there was a blinking light, an old message, from the night before the crash. Ethan said, I stared at the machine. We hadn't used that line in months. But Marlene had the number, and Vince, if he was with her, play it, I said. Ethan pressed the button. The tape whirred and clicked. Wednesday, 8:43 p.m. Static crackled. Then, a voice. It was deep, smooth, and terrifyingly casual. Marlene, pick up. I know you are there. Vince, look, I am done waiting on the bank. You said the daughter was the key. You said she was the soft spot. So make her sign the papers. Marlene, get the property released, or get the old man to open the checkbook. There was a pause, a sound like a lighter flicking. You have until Friday. If I don't have the cash, I am going to stop being nice, and I am going to make sure that little family of yours has a very bad weekend. You understand? Make her sign, or I unlock the money my way. The tape clicked off. The silence in the basement was heavy enough to crush us. Unlock the money my way. The crash happened on Thursday. He gave her until Friday. He didn't cut the brakes to kill me instantly. He cut them to cause a crisis, to put me in the hospital, to force Walter's hand. Marlene knew. I whispered. She knew he was threatening us. She might not have known he cut the brakes. Ethan said, his face pale. But she knew he was coming for us, and she didn't warn us. She sent me into that car. I said, she borrowed it, gave it to him to sabotage, and then she let me drive it. I felt like I was going to throw up. She rolled the dice on my life. I said, she bet that I would just get hurt enough to need her, but not enough to die. We have to give this to the detective. Ethan said, my body did not handle the revelation well. I woke up the next morning with a fever. My incision was red and hot to the touch. The doctor at the urgent care clinic frowned as she examined me. You are not healing, she said. Your cortisol levels are through the roof. Lila, your body is stuck in fight or flight mode. It is suppressing your immune system. She wrote me a prescription for antibiotics and looked me in the eye. You need to reduce your stress, she said. You need to rest. If you don't, you are going to end up back in the hospital. I laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. My stress is my mother. I said, unless you can prescribe a new family, I don't know what to tell you. I went home and did the only thing that felt like rest. I took action. I sat at the computer and filled out the forms for a temporary restraining order against Vincent Calder. I attached the police report number. I attached the transcript of the voicemail. I attached the mechanic's report. It wasn't dramatic. It was boring. It was hour after hour of typing, scanning, and printing, but every page I printed felt like a brick in the wall. I am not a victim. I told myself as the printer hummed, I am a documentation machine. Marlene, realizing she had lost access to the house and to me, decided to take her case to the court of public opinion. On Saturday morning, my phone started buzzing with notifications. I opened Facebook. There was a photo of my house. It was taken from the street, likely from inside a car. You could see the baby swing on the porch. The caption read, "It is a special kind of cruelty to keep a grandmother from her own flesh and blood. I spent my life sacrificing for my daughter, and now that she is married into a new life, I am being erased. Money changes people. Pray for my heart." The comments were a cesspool. That is awful. Marlene, ungrateful kids these days. Don't give up. Grandparents have rights. One comment stood out. It was from a woman I went to high school with. Is this about Lila? I thought she was sweet. Sad to see her turn on family. I felt my face burning. The humiliation was physical. It felt like being stripped naked in the town square. She was twisting the narrative, using my silence against me. I started to type a reply. She almost killed me. She is a thief. Ethan took the phone out of my hand. Don't, he said. She is lying, I cried. She is making me look like a monster. If you engage, you feed it, Ethan said. You get down in the mud with her, and she is better at the mud than you are. I called Walter. She posted a photo of the house. I said, I saw it. Walter said, do something. I begged. It is already done. Walter said, my lawyer sent a cease and desist letter to her email 10 minutes ago. It outlines that posting unauthorized photos of a private residence involving a minor, coupled with defamatory statements that contradict police records, exposes her to a libel suit. Will she listen? She will listen to the threat of a lawsuit. Walter said, she doesn't have the money to fight it. 10 minutes later, the post was gone, but the shame lingered. I closed the blinds. I felt like the whole town was watching. The final blow to Marlene's story came on Monday. Detective Miller asked us to come down to the station. Walter came with us. We left Nora with a vetted babysitter, a woman Walter knew and paid for because I refused to bring her into a police station. Miller looked grim. He pulled up a video file on his computer monitor. "This is from the Northbridge service station," Miller said. "It is dated 2 nights before the crash. 2 a.m. The footage was grainy, black and white. It showed the back lot of the garage where Vince had worked, in the corner of the frame, under a flickering sodium light. Was my car. I recognized the bumper sticker. A figure walked into the frame. He was tall, wearing a hoodie. He walked with a distinctive, loping gait. He approached the car. He knelt down by the front driver's side wheel. He was there for 4 minutes. Then he stood up, wiped something on his pants, and walked away. The face was obscured by the hood, but the height, the build, the walk. It was Vince. Miller paused the video. "We showed this to the station manager," Miller said. "He confirmed that Vince Calder was on shift that night as the watchman. He looked at me, and we have the logbook. Mrs. Collins, the logbook shows that the vehicle was signed in at 6 p.m. by a Marlene Bishop. Reason for drop-off, safety inspection." I stared at the screen. "She signed it in," I whispered. "She told the manager she heard a noise," Miller said. "She asked specifically for Vince to look at it. The room spun. She didn't just give him the car. She created the opportunity. She served me up on a platter. I didn't call her. I drove to her condo. Ethan drove. Walter sat in the back. I sat in the passenger seat, holding the printout of the surveillance log. We parked in front of her unit. I got out. I walked up the path. I banged on the door. Marlene opened it. She looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen, her hair unwashed. She was wearing a bathrobe. When she saw me, she tried to smile. "Lila," she said, "you came." I held up the photo of the logbook. "Safety inspection?" I asked. Marlene's face went white. She grabbed the door frame. "He told me to," she cried. "He told me the car sounded rough. He said he would fix it for free." He cut the line. "Mom," I said, "we have him on video. He knelt down and he cut the brake line, and you signed the car over to him." "I didn't know he would cut it," she screamed. She fell to her knees on the doormat. "I didn't know. I just wanted him to stop threatening me. I thought if I did him a favor, if I let him look at the car, he would give me more time to pay. You traded my safety for time," I said. "You traded Nora's life for an extension on a loan. I was trying to protect you," she sobbed. "I thought if I kept him happy, he wouldn't come to the house. I was trying to keep him away from you." The contradiction hung in the air, gross and heavy. She had endangered me to protect me. She had nearly killed me to save me. It was the logic of an addict, the logic of a narcissist. I looked down at her. I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The fear was gone. There was just a cold, flat clarity. "You are done." I said, "Lila, please," she begged, reaching for my leg. "Don't touch me," I said. I stepped back. "Listen to me, Marlene, because I am only going to say this once." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "You are not my mother anymore," I said. "You are a liability." I took a breath. "You want to see Nora? You want to be a grandmother?" "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, please." "Then you earn it," I said. "How?" she asked. "You go to the police station today," I said. "You confess to the fraud on the rental property. You tell them everything about Vince. You testify against him. You take the consequences. I can't go to jail." "Lila," she wailed. "Then you don't get the baby," I said. I turned around. "And one more thing," I said over my shoulder. "Pay Walter back. Every cent." I walked back to the truck. I got in. "Drive." I told Ethan. I didn't look back at the condo. I didn't look back at the woman kneeling on the mat. I looked at the dashboard. I looked at the road ahead. It was a long road. But for the first time in my life, I was driving it alone, and I wasn't afraid. The Fairmont County Courthouse was a building designed to make you feel small. It was all gray stone and towering pillars, a structure built to endure while the lives of the people inside it fell apart. I walked up the steps holding Ethan's hand. My palm was sweating, but his grip was dry and firm. Walter walked ahead of us, his cane clicking against the concrete with a rhythmic, military precision. He wore a charcoal suit that looked like armor. We were there for a combined hearing, a legal mess that tangled 3 different threads of my life into one knot. There was the hearing for the permanent protective order against Vincent Calder. There was the review of the Bishop Family Trust governance. And there was the inquiry into the financial misconduct that had started this entire nightmare. I saw Marlene's car in the lot. She had parked far away, near the back fence. I squeezed Ethan's hand. "I am ready," I said. "You don't have to be ready," Ethan said softly. "You just have to be there." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. It smelled of floor wax and old paper. The judge, an older woman named Judge Abernathy, sat behind a high wooden bench, reviewing a stack of files that contained the wreckage of my family history. Marlene was already seated at the defendant's table on the left. She had a lawyer with her, a man in a cheap suit who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. Marlene looked diminished. She was wearing a navy blue dress, high-necked and conservative, but it hung loosely on her frame. She didn't look at me. She stared at a spot on the table. Her hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles were white. I sat on the right, between Ethan and Walter's attorney. "Mr. Pierce?" The proceedings began with a dull, bureaucratic hum. Lawyers cited statutes and filed motions. It felt clinical, detached from the visceral terror of the car accident. Then, they called me to the stand. I walked to the witness box. I swore to tell the truth. I sat down and looked out at the room. I saw Ethan, his face open and encouraging. I saw Walter, his face a mask of stone. And I saw my mother, who finally looked up at me with eyes full of a terrifying, pleading panic. "Mrs. Collins," Mr. Pierce began, "can you describe the events of October 24th at Pine Ridge Medical Center?" I took a breath. I put my hands on my lap to keep them from shaking. I had just survived a car crash. I said, my voice was steady, surprising me. I was being wheeled into the trauma unit. I was bleeding internally. My daughter, Nora, was 3 days old. She was in a bassinet next to me. And what was the disposition of the child? There was no one to take her. I said, my husband had not arrived yet. The hospital staff told me that if a family member did not take temporary responsibility, they would have to place her in emergency foster care while I went into surgery. And was a family member present? Yes. I said, my mother, Marlene Bishop. What did she do? I looked directly at Marlene. She flinched. She refused. I said, the courtroom was silent. No one coughed. No papers rustled. Can you be more specific, Mr.? Pierce asked. She told the nurse she did not do newborns. I said, she said she would not be trapped again. She walked out of the NICU while I was begging her to stay. I didn't say it with anger. I didn't shout. I just let the words hang there. Simple and heavy. Marlene's lawyer stood up for cross-examination. But he looked defeated before he even began. Mrs. Collins, he said, isn't it true that your mother suffers from hypertension and anxiety? Yes. I said, and isn't it possible that in the chaos of a trauma center, she was simply experiencing a medical episode of her own, that she was overwhelmed? I looked at the lawyer. I was bleeding from a ruptured spleen. I said, I was overwhelmed, but I was still trying to protect my daughter. She was standing there in a coat and gloves, worried about her liability. That is not a medical episode. That is a choice. The lawyer sat down. When they called Marlene to the stand, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It went from clinical to tragic. She walked to the stand shakily. She looked like she was walking to the gallows. State your name, the bailiff said. Marlene Bishop. She whispered. Judge Abernathy leaned forward. She adjusted her glasses. Ms. Bishop, the judge said, I have read the social worker's report. I have read the affidavit from the hospital administrator. I want to hear it from you. Why did you leave the hospital? Marlene looked at the judge. She opened her mouth, and for a second, I thought she was going to lie. I thought she was going to spin a story about a migraine or a misunderstanding. I was scared. Marlene said, Her voice was thin. Scared of the baby, the judge asked. Scared of everything. Marlene said. She started to cry. But it wasn't the manipulative crying I was used to. It was a messy, ugly leaking of emotion. My life was falling apart. I had debt collectors calling me. I had Vince threatening me. I went to the hospital hoping what the judge pressed, hoping it would be over. Marlene whispered, I thought if there was a crisis, my father would have to step in. I thought if I just stepped back, the money would come. So you used your granddaughter as leverage, the judge asked. Her tone was sharp. No, Marlene cried. Not leverage. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle one more thing needing me. I just wanted someone to save me. She put her face in her hands. I refused. She sobbed into her palms. I said no. I walked away. She had said it. Finally, the silence that followed was devastating. It wasn't a victory. It felt like watching a building collapse. My mother sat there, stripped of her excuses, stripped of her dignity, admitting that she was too broken to hold a child. She didn't look like a villain. She looked like a ruin. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Ethan. He didn't say anything, but he didn't have to. We both saw it. The monster we had been fighting was just a sad, desperate woman who had dug a hole so deep she had buried her own family in it. The court took a recess before the ruling on the financial trust. We walked out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Walter went to the vending machine to get a bottle of water. Ethan went to the restroom. I stood alone by a window, looking out at the parking lot. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out. Unknown caller. I stared at the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I shouldn't answer. I knew I should let it go to voicemail and give it to the detective, but something, an instinct, a need to know, made me slide my thumb across the screen. Hello, Lila. The voice was rough, fast. Vince, I held the phone tight. You are violating a court order. Vince, I am standing in the courthouse. There are police everywhere. I don't care about the police, Vince said. He sounded frantic. The smooth, confident con man was gone. He sounded like a rat trapped in a corner. Listen to me. You need to tell your grandfather to back off. Walter doesn't take orders from you. I said, he should. Vince hissed, because I know about Briar Glen. I froze. Briar Glen. I know what he did 10 years ago, Vince said. I know about the cover-up. You think he is the saint? You think he is the white knight? Ask him about the missing funds from the outreach program. Ask him why he paid $50,000 to bury a report. What are you talking about? I asked. He isn't clean. Lila, Vince shouted. He is just like us. He buys his way out of trouble. If he doesn't drop the investigation on the car, if he doesn't get the cops off my back, I am going to leak it all. I will destroy the Bishop name for good. The line went dead. I stood there, the phone warm in my hand. Walter was walking back from the vending machine. He was unscrewing the cap of a water bottle. He looked steady, immovable. Walter, I said. He stopped. He saw the look on my face. Who was on the phone? He asked. It was Vince. I said. Walter's jaw tightened. He is a fool. He said he knows about Briar Glen. I said. He said you covered up a scandal. He said you paid money to bury a report. Walter didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He took a slow sip of water and capped the bottle. He is right, Walter said. My stomach dropped. You stole money. No, Walter said. I never stole a dime. But I covered for someone who did. Who? The director of the program, Walter said. A man named Thomas Reed. He was a good man with a gambling addiction. He took $50,000 from the operating fund. When I found out, the board wanted to go public. They wanted to prosecute. And you stopped them. I stopped them, Walter said. Because if the scandal went public, the donors would have pulled out. The shelter would have closed. There were 40 families living in that shelter. Lila, if I had let the truth come out, Thomas would have gone to jail, but 40 families would have been on the street in the middle of winter. He looked at me, his eyes tired but clear. So I wrote a check. He said, I replaced the missing money from my own pocket. I forced Thomas to resign quietly. And I buried the report. But that is illegal, I whispered. That is obstruction. Technically, yes, Walter said. Morally, I made a choice. I chose the vulnerable over the truth. He stepped closer to me. Vince thinks that makes me like him, Walter said. He thinks because I have secrets. I am corrupt, but there is a difference. Lila, I used my power to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Vince uses people to protect himself. I looked at my grandfather. For years, Marlene had told me he was a tyrant. She had told me he used money to control people. And in a way, he did. He manipulated the board. He hid the truth. But he did it to keep a roof over 40 families. Vince had cut my brakes to save his own skin. Walter had risked his reputation to save strangers. It wasn't a perfect morality. It was messy. It was gray. But it was not predatory. Vince is trying to blackmail us. I said, let him try. Walter said, I am an old man. Lila, my reputation is not as important as your safety. If the price of putting Vince Calder in jail is my good name, I will pay it. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't just see a grandfather. I saw a man who understood that sometimes. Being good means getting your hands dirty. Tell the detective, I said. Tell him Vince called. We are not burying this. Walter nodded. Good girl. We went back into the courtroom. Judge Abernathy returned to the bench. She looked at the papers in front of her, regarding the matter of the protective order. She said, based on the evidence provided, including the mechanic's report from Ridgeway Auto and the voicemail transcript, I am granting a permanent restraining order against Vincent Calder. He is to have no contact with Lila Collins, Ethan Collins, or the minor child Nora Collins. He is to stay 500 yards away from their residence and places of employment. She banged the gavel. Regarding the matter of the Bishop Family Trust, she continued. She looked at Marlene. The court finds that the current trustee arrangement is insufficient to protect the interests of the beneficiary, Lila Collins. Given the demonstrated conflict of interest and hostility from the familial contingent, Marlene flinched at the word hostility. I am approving the petition to restructure the trust, the judge said, effective immediately. Funds for medical recovery, childcare, and housing security will be released directly to vendors approved by Mrs. Collins. An independent fiduciary will be appointed to oversee the account. Marlene Bishop is removed from any oversight capacity or beneficiary status regarding these specific funds. It was done. The money was unlocked. But it wasn't Marlene's money. It was mine. It was a shield she could not penetrate. Regarding the criminal inquiry into the vehicle tampering, the judge said, looking at Detective Miller, who was sitting in the back, that is outside the jurisdiction of this family court hearing. But the court recommends that the transcripts of today's testimony be forwarded to the district attorney's office immediately. She looked at Marlene one last time. Ms. Bishop, she said, you are not going to jail today, but you are leaving this courtroom with a heavy burden. You have lost the trust of your family. The law can protect them from your debts, but it cannot fix what you broke. Good luck. The gavel banged again. All rise. The courtroom emptied out slowly. Walter went to speak with Mr. Pierce. Ethan went to get the car. I walked toward the heavy oak doors. Lila. It was a small voice, a whisper. I turned. Marlene was standing by the defendant's table. Her lawyer had already left. She was alone. She didn't look crazy anymore. She didn't look angry. She just looked old. I waited. I didn't walk toward her, but I didn't walk away. Can I? Marlene started. She stopped, swallowed, and tried again. Can I ever make it right? She wasn't begging. She wasn't performing for an audience. It was just a question, a real question. I looked at her. I thought about the car. I thought about the hospital. I thought about the years of manipulation, the letters from the bank, the lies. Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me wanted to say die alone. But that was the anger talking, and the anger was exhausted. I answered honestly, I don't know. I said. Marlene nodded. Tears spilled over her lashes. Silent and fast. I don't know. Mom. I repeated. You broke the foundation. You can't build a house on a sinkhole. I understand, she whispered. I am not letting you see Nora. I said, not now. Maybe not for a long time. You have to get help. Real help. Not a spa day, not a shopping trip, therapy, financial counseling. You have to become a person who is safe. I will, she said. I will try. I looked at her one last time. Then try. I said, but do it for you, not for me. I pushed the doors open and walked out into the hallway. Walter was waiting for me. He offered me his arm. Did she ask for money? Walter asked. No. I said, she asked for forgiveness. And what did you give her? I gave her the truth. I said, Walter patted my hand. That is more than she deserves, but exactly what she needs. We drove home in silence. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the highway. We passed the exit for Northbridge Parkway, the ramp where the accident had happened. I looked at the guardrail. It was still dented, a jagged scar of metal against the darkening sky. It looked small now. It was just a piece of metal. It wasn't a monster. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked different. It wasn't a fortress anymore. It was just a house, our house. The babysitter met us at the door. She has been an angel, she said, smiling. She slept the whole time. I went straight to the nursery. Nora was awake. She was lying in her crib, staring up at the mobile of felt stars that hung above her head. She was kicking her legs, making soft, cooing sounds. I picked her up. She felt solid and warm. She smelled of milk and baby powder. I sat in the rocking chair, the old wooden one, not the velvet one Marlene had sent, and I held her against my chest. Ethan came in and stood in the doorway. He loosened his tie. Is it over? He asked. The court case is over. I said, the investigation is still going. Vince is still out there, even if he can't come near us. Marlene is still... Marlene. So it isn't over, Ethan said. I looked down at Nora. I watched her chest rise and fall. I felt the steady beat of her heart against mine. I realized then that it would never really be over. Safety wasn't a finish line you crossed. It wasn't a trophy you put on a shelf. Safety was a practice. It was the daily choice to lock the doors. It was the choice to check the brake lines. It was the choice to tell the truth. Even when it was ugly, it was the choice to cut out the rot. Even when the rot was family. It is not over. I said to Ethan, but we are winning. Ethan walked over and knelt beside the chair. He wrapped his arms around both of us. We are winning. He agreed. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of my daughter breathing. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. It sounded like the future, and the future was ours. Thank you so much for listening to My Mother Refused My Newborn. During my car accident, Grandpa's one call changed everything. This has been an emotional journey through the complexities of family, betrayal, and the lengths a mother will go to for her child. I hope Lila's strength resonated with you. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment below telling me which country or city you are listening from, and share your thoughts on the ending. Do you think Lila should ever forgive Marlene if you enjoyed this story? Please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories so you never miss an episode. Your support means the world to me. Thank you, and stay safe.